Catherine and Gary have joined us as well. Welcome, Catherine. Welcome, Gary. I'm going to call the meeting to order because we have quorum just to get started at 5:32. And just for the record, for Catherine Tinsley after the fact, although I suspect she'll view a recorded version. Chris, we are being recorded, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I see the icon there. Thank you. Okay, so that it just for the verbal record, Jim Purdy, Mike Therian, Carrie Gelsma, David Militano. So we are a go. Okay, so falling into our regular Wednesday weekly Zoom meeting. Chris, I think the timing is going to, we're okay now with Wednesdays. Is that correct?
Yes, I was after your introduction, I was gonna bring that up. Yep, Jackie's, the Board of Health moved back to Wednesday morning, so we can go back. We have the Wednesdays now, so I was gonna have Jackie just book the Wednesdays for us going forward. Just wanted to touch base. What it does, 5:30 work the best, or 6 o'clock, or does one time work better than another now in these circumstances?
Right. Thanks for asking. Was just going to do the same. Anyone have any objection or strong preference to 5:30, 6? Any of them? I mean, we're all stuck inside. Does this time work okay?
5:30 works for me.
Thanks,
Yep, me too.
dude. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it wraps up the workday. It gives you a reason to pen down, I guess, from other stuff, or put the hammer down, Mike, if you're building your house. Okay, so we'll plan on 5:30 then, and
Okay.
this is regrouping in the context of FY21, just in general, and obviously in the context of FY21 and impact of COVID on 20/21. So to that end, I think what we want to do is keep a regular and open discussion and dialogue on those matters. I know that Anthony's unable to join because of the Board of Health Forum, or what was it exactly, Chris?
Board of Health Forum.
Board of Health Forum. Thanks, Carrie. What I was hoping to get was maybe a quick update on the joint discussion with Hamilton, if at all, if possible, if there's anything pertinent for FinCom to consider. There was a joint meeting. Catherine, I know you're on the line. Feel free to chime in at any point. But don't feel obligated to. I can't see you, so I can't see if you're in the room or not. But to the extent that there are joint program changes, or I mean, I can't see really what else would impact Wenham from the standpoint of discussions with Hamilton other than joint program changes and overall discussion on the. Hey, Catherine. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Figured I'd show my face.
No, I was just, thanks. And if you wanted to share anything, were you in the meeting with Hamilton?
The joint selectmen meeting with Hamilton, yes.
Correct, okay.
I think we talked a bit about save the date for town meeting and the elections. I don't know if that information has gotten to you. I think at the moment, it's literally just a discussion, but it's a save the date. I think the dates are June 20th, which would be a Saturday for town meeting, and the following Thursday for elections.
25th.
Subject to whatever, whatever.
Yeah, right.
That time.
Okay.
Relative to budgets, it sounds like Hamilton has the ability with their expenses to curtail expenses enough to cover their payroll and, not have to really do any kind of furloughing. At least that seems to be for FY20. And
Right.
FY21 sounds like they're just beginning to think about how they would handle that. So that was really their update, I think.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're in the same boat with regard to very early considerations for FY21. Certainly don't have all the answers or even all the questions just yet. Chris, do you have any thoughts on like cash flow impact and to Catherine's point, payroll and the like with regard to at-risk measures there?
I think right now, is really tough to tell. We've been able to make payroll in our AP warrants. We moved our, we were doing weekly APs. We moved them to bi-weekly now to give them more time for revenue to come in. Relating to going forward, I think it's still a little early to tell. We just sent out the fourth quarter tax bills, so we haven't really got a good feel on the payment yet, you know, how many people are going to be able to pay and pay on time and everything. I did, as of 2 weeks ago, our revenue stream was pretty much in line with prior years, the last 2 fiscal years. But that hasn't, we may not see that changed until the next few weeks if payments aren't coming in. So unfortunately, I feel it's a little bit early. So right now our cash flow is fine, but we'll know a little bit better, I think, in the next, you know, coming couple weeks or so.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine the impact to receipts is going to play out rapidly, but has yet to.
Exactly. We don't, like the state aid, and we, you know, that where you don't get a ton of that. So even if they do cut some of that, like Anthony mentioned, I believe in the last meeting, that shouldn't affect us too much in that regard. So we really, for us, we just really need to wait and see how the property tax revenue comes in, and it's still a little early to tell on that right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, sorry to interrupt. And also, we're just finally getting back. Century Bank, our lockbox, got hit hard with Corona, with the COVID-19, and they weren't able to process our lockbox payments for, it was like a 2.5-3 week period, but they're back up and running now. So they're also getting caught up. So they haven't fully caught up yet. So we're still getting a little backtrack of revenue too to get caught up with. So once they get all caught up, we'll have a better understanding with that as well.
The lockbox payments are predominantly which receipts? Tax payments?
Any payment, that's when you mail your payments into our lockbox at Century Bank in Medford.
Right.
So any online goes through City Hall system. So any check that gets mailed not to Town Hall would be processed. So it could be water, excise, personal property.
Has first quarter water gone out? I don't think I saw that in my mailbox. Anyone else get theirs?
I'm not sure. I know there were, I know last I talked with Eric, they were waiting a little bit for the demands because of that Century Bank without the lockbox getting all their processed payments. We didn't want to send out the demands and stuff with the new bills. If people had already paid, we were trying to give them a little break. We didn't want them to then, because we couldn't tell if they paid or not yet. But I can follow up with, if we haven't yet, they should be soon. I'll follow up with Eric tomorrow. I'll touch base with him and Sherry, see how that's coming along.
Okay, but that'll be a slew of revenue payments, obviously, towards the water fund that'll come in soon. But other than that, the couple weeks that Century Bank has been out of commission on processing on their end, which is, I guess, understandable. The slowdown hasn't really impacted us, to your earlier point, in terms of measurable revenue impact in the near term, because we likely weren't expecting much.
Yeah, so it would be probably. I'll be doing another one. I'll send it out to you guys too. I've been putting together all our revenue, comparing it to the last 2 years, each line and how it's been collected. So we probably, if there is a little hold up in those payments, it would probably be in the next couple weeks that we'd see that maybe a little downfall, and then probably in like 3 weeks, it should be maybe a little catch up when we start getting those.
Okay.
So you don't, Mike, so you don't expect any problems in terms of all the revenue coming in for FY20?
I think if it's
in
really,
terms of matching expenses, revenue?
I mean, the revenue, we're 90-some% property tax. So it's going to come down to how hard the residents are hit in our, in Wenham, and if they're able to make their payments timely. And, the due date is May 1st. Still, there's been no talks about extending that. Or, I haven't heard of them wanting to extend that. I've been talking with Steve, the assessor, and he didn't really recommend extending that at all. So I think by the May 1st, I think that will be when we'll really start seeing if there's going to be a cash flow issue coming that May 1st when all the property tax bills are due.
Just a comment
Yeah.
from the
Yeah,
meeting the
back-
other night with the Hamilton and Wenham selectmen. If I remember correctly, and if Catherine's still on, Hamilton did a very conservative projection of possible revenues. I think they reduced it, and they were about 98% too, but I think they did a projection of, I think, like 92 or 94% collections, and we're kind of doing that exercise. I don't know if that's something we might want to think about in the future, or is it too soon? But they were kind of working on some assumptions based upon reduced revenues.
And that was for FY '21.
For 21, that's right.
Yeah,
How much had they reduced that by, Catherine? Like 4% or something, 4 points?
I think it was 4 to 5 points, but they seemed as if they had a lot more thinking about that to do. Since this
Yeah.
was so unprecedented, they were still working on it. But yeah, I think they said 94.
Yeah.
They were going to go
something
down
like
93 or 94.
Jim, to your point, when you said 98, you're saying their kind of steady state is in the close to 100% collection?
I think they used the percent 98 as their
Yep.
routine
Yes.
Yeah,
collection rate, and they're doing projections and some guesstimates at a reduced rate of like whatever the number was, like maybe 94% or 92% or something.
that's helpful. Thanks. I could see it playing out in a similar manner, but not knowing how do you even venture on what do you base the reduction other than the fact that there will be one.
It was just an assumption. It was just a conservative assumption, so they could say, okay, what do we have in the bank, and what would it mean for 21?
Yeah, I think that's smart to just even play out multiple scenarios to
Yeah,
say
you- oh,
for
yeah.
5%, a 10%
Yeah, you could use any
reduction.
numbers. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's irrelevant what number you choose. It's likely not to be 50% or even 30%, but whatever you choose to understand the impact of cash flow, because that's the crunch that would be in,
That's right.
right? And not making payroll, not making the school's payment, and then you're looking at options that you wouldn't otherwise want to entertain, like revenue.
Right.
And on the flip side of
Notes.
that, considering if there's any program expenses that aren't being expended, so are there any savings anywhere?
For
Yes,
sure.
we've been looking into that, Carrie, as well. I've been working with Anthony. We've been looking into scenarios on certain like programs or part-time. Some of the part-time workers aren't working right now, so there's savings there. Some of, like, just an example, Jim Reynolds at the COA, some of his he does a lot of programs over there. A lot of them aren't happening now, so there's some savings there. So we have been looking in some both current year savings for fiscal 20 and potentially going into 21.
Okay.
I think it would be good to try to quantify a couple of those categories of immediate expenditure decreases that have taken place. I suspect that most of them have played out by now. There's not much left to stop in terms of activity that costs money to run, and that which has stopped is not about to resume. So I'm curious what reduction in expenditures related to things like utilities, for example, in no specific order, but the payrolls, to your point, Chris, about part-time employees, but also other energy and utilities and the like, how that has played out. I mean, impact on things like permitting and inspection, which I know is still up and running technically, but how that's playing out in terms of revenue to the town. And then we can also project a little bit beyond that too, based on some indicators, some metrics of what we would otherwise use if to continue on the permitting example, if things are very busy and we expect permits to wrap up or slow, I think we could see those types of things fall off. I would also think that the schools would do their own analysis, and perhaps we should assemble a list of, I know there's just some general questions that relate to this. I would hope that the schools, even though it's a beautiful warm day today, have been a balmy, 63 degrees, even in the really cold weather that we might have had a couple weeks ago, whatever. And lighting expenses have fallen off, whatever. Just let's, and food expenses, as has been brought up before, right? We're not running the cafeteria. So what has been the immediate, out of curiosity, how do the schools, how does the district categorize its expense impact from coronavirus, and also on the town side, where are we up against? So I'd be curious if anyone has any ideas about other categories that they see. And then for some of those, there's the immediate impact, there's the near-term projection if it's going to change, and I suspect most are in the NA category. And then there's the FY21, does it stretch to that? And one example I'll throw out there is, like who's going to be buying a pool pass to Veterans Pool for this summer? Who's going to be buying a sticker to Pleasant Pond? That stuff ain't happening. I jogged Monument Street last night, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to start playing tennis? And I see the little piddly, ridiculous little piece of yellow tape over the gates there by the WVIS. I think that's who owns it anyway, right? The courts. So that was a disappointment. But understandable. I just say that as an aside. So there's lots of stuff that is simply not going to happen that'll affect revenues, and it'll affect expenses. And I think we should start to categorize some of those things as we put numbers on them. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, with regards to all the utilities, I have reached out to Mike Hardy, the facilities director, and majority of our buildings are still up and running, and they're still open. So I don't think we're going to see too much of a reduction in expenses in the utilities. The library, Kim at the library, she's still going to the library. Jim's still going to council on aging. Police and fire is still open. Town hall is still open. So I don't know how much, like you said, unless, maybe if they're not turning the heat on or something, but I don't think we're going to save. I don't think that we're going to see too much in that, at least for the remaining of this year. Because the buildings are still open.
Is the rec department open?
I can't imagine it is.
I know Sean has been there. I don't know too much. That's something that Hamilton runs, and then we pay them the assessment. I know Sean's been in meetings. We've had some department head meetings, and Sean's been there down at the rec department, but he says it's just him. And they have canceled a lot of their programs. I don't know the true extent of that because Hamilton runs the rec, and we just pay them the assessment.
So I think that's fair. I mean, the buildings are still open and operations are continuing as appropriate. So certainly town hall is not going to be dark and frigid. At the same time, there is going to be a change in consumption of lots of sorts. And it just, to give an example, with all sports being canceled, many of those in the late winter, early spring are indoors, right? You think about basketball, with David coaching, right? Bucher would normally be lit up several nights a week and now won't be. So even if it's a small, right, percentage change, I would expect we'd see something. And this is a curiosity, by the way, I might add. This is only only, I think in the spirit of tracking what the impact financially to our town and neighboring towns it has and will be. It isn't to suggest that problems are solved by spending a little bit less in diesel gas, right? Because DPW is still doing their thing. But on the margin, everything has slowed and everything has declined. And I would hope we see that play out in some measurable reduction in expenses, given that we know on the revenue side, we're going to take a hit.
Yes.
So I welcome thoughts on any of those kind of categories, what you'd like, what you would envision seeing a change in, what you would propose a change to, although I think policy-wise, the direction has been set and cast nationally, globally, for much of that, such that there's little room for us to change anything, even if we wanted to. Yeah, Jim.
Just a comment. We're still waiting, I believe, on Anthony's feedback around reductions for 20 that the selectmen have requested of him. So that's still to come, correct?
Yeah, I think a lot of I think the impetus for some of these discussions in part was Jack's indication of reduced support for a level, not level services. He characterized it as business as usual budget,
Right.
Which I guess to be the budget that we had set to move forward with. If we change any of it, now's the time to start talking about it. Yeah. So yes, to your point, Jim, we've got to hear back from Anthony with some of those details.
Yeah. The other comment I have is in watching part of the school committee meeting the other night, they indicated that there is savings. They didn't go into detail, or I didn't hear the detail, but they are recognizing savings. I don't know how much, but they're looking at that.
But the buildings are shuttered. Aside from labor, I don't, salary costs rather, I don't know what there is to really continue with regard to expenditures on the school side. But I would think they would see a difference anyway, and describe that, quantify, describe it, and it would only help their FY20 situation that they're in, where their budget.
I think transportation was one where they were going to see a little bit more substantial savings on the bus company.
I didn't watch it, Jim. Did they comment on contractually how that works? I mean, there should be zero paid out, but there's a contract. So did they describe on how this is working?
I believe they had discussions with the bus company for reduction of costs, but we would need to find that out in more detail.
Correct. Right. New Hampshire, I think, just canceled schools for the rest of the year. Officially. Did anyone else catch that? I think that just happened today.
Who's canceled schools?
State of New Hampshire.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
So Mass will follow suit, likely. Who knows, right? So that just confirms or doesn't confirm anything, but that if it happens, that's just what we're all, I'm sure, thinking anyway. Okay. Then kind of combining or extending that category of FY20 impact, which I think will seek to help with help from Chris and Anthony and the select board, get a handle on just what the changes are, perhaps with the select board more so for FY21, engaging in discussions of what changes there are there. I do think it's appropriate to entertain some. I look to the rest of FinCom and to select board for examples of where we need to, of areas of budget that we need to revisit. I think some are obvious, like I said, the example of Pleasant Pond, and I'm not trying to single that out as something I'm after for reduction. I think we're all kind of supportive of the standard level of service continuing operations for FY21 before this hit. I don't know how you really consider town services that were so directly impacted as again, the library or some of these kind of recreational group gathering type services, which are the backbone in the very nature of our community, what our residents love, but unfortunately do not have access to. I don't know how you consider those as being funded in the normal sense. But the Flip side of that is what do you alter, to what extent, for what duration? And is there any kind of middle ground whereby operations continue at a reduced level of service and associated cost? So please do be thinking about each of those for the departments or budget categories to which you liaise, and just in general.
Yep, and we have been, both me, Jackie, I, and Anthony have all been, we've been putting together a spreadsheet with potential, cuts for our savings for 20 and 21. So we have been working on that. Like right now we had like the 21 budget example, we had some like part-time help for both, like DPW, building and grounds. So, obviously if this goes on, we'll, there's some savings right there. We'd rather keep our full-time employees than, hire some part-time help. So we have been trying to look through as, in depth as we can with what we know right now, and trying to come up with, some lists and quantify it in dollars. So I know we've gave some ideas to Anthony. He's working on it. That's why I think we haven't seen, he hasn't shared it yet, but it's been something that we've been working on.
Do you think, Chris, that might be something for next week's meeting?
Yeah, I'll touch base on him for sure. Like I said, we've been putting together. I just want to touch base with him first, because we've been giving him the ideas and he's been putting together, make sure he's ready to share. I don't know, if he wants to get do any finishing touches to it before he makes it public or not. But I'll touch base with him, and hopefully we can have it ready to go for next Wednesday.
Okay, thanks. How has public safety been impacted, police and fire in any way? Has there been, do you happen to know offhand, and that might be more for Anthony, we can defer the question, but I was just wondering, like, if there's been a kind of a change in their service level approach in light of
I know I touched base. I got on some of that Board of Health forum, the 3:00 one. That was actually when I got on, was when both the police and fire were talking about their new procedures. So I know they have instituted new procedures. They're both checking temperatures when any of the officers come in, try to, make sure everyone's healthy. They, wearing the proper, face masks and all that stuff. So I know they have been doing additional stuff to, yes, David, sorry.
No, I have a question. I'm just, when you're done,
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay. So they have taken new procedures to, keep everyone safe and make sure they're not, passing it on to anyone. And I know they have been tracking any extra expenses, so we are keeping track of that. I know there's been a little bit extra overtime and, extra supplies purchased, but we've been keeping track of that. And if not all of that, we'll definitely be getting a portion of that reimbursed from FEMA or the state sending some grants and everything. So, Anthony may be able, that's kind of what I know. Anthony may be able to add a little bit more insight next time, but that's what I know right now from their procedures.
Okay.
I missed the meeting. My general question was, are they working with Gordon? Like, are the Wenham COVID cases at Gordon, or are they residents, or are they working hand in hand with Gordon, or is it kind of separate?
I'm not positive on that one.
Can I just
okay.
jump in here for a second about Gordon? Gordon has a very small population of students right now. They're only students that could not make it home after spring break. So I think they're operating, barely operational.
Minimal. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
It makes sense, providing just the bare bones services to keep them in-house as would be required.
Yeah, I think there's like one dining hall open, and they're probably socially distanced, but I don't think there are more than a couple of hundred students there.
Thank you. So in looking at changes to expenses and any, probably those are going to be identifiable and realized more quickly than revenue impact, which I think will play out in the coming months, perhaps. That would be great if next week we could look at that. I'd also like to look at, as we start to regroup on FY21 budget and recommend, well, the budget that we put forth to the town for town meeting on, I guess, June 20th, as well as changes to the total spend. This, I think, alters the override to some degree, in that we're in dire, fiscal straits on a good day, and now we're, basically officially in a recession before we can call it. What is that? What are the implications of that for the likelihood of our override or overrides passing in the town? I personally don't have a good sense for it, but it likely doesn't help them. So we want to be revisiting FY21 very carefully.
Yes, and that is something we have put together in case the override did not pass. We do have cuts already, savings cuts in line in case the override didn't pass for that 267,000 and change, whatever it was. So that we have got that, and now the sheet we're looking to go above and beyond in case we need any more potential savings going into from revenue shortfalls. So
Right. Yeah, that's something we were going to kind of have it at the disposal of public information anyway, right? Ultimately leading into the originally scheduled town meeting, should a resident seek to understand what the town stops providing in the event the town override were not to pass. And then Anthony in last week's meeting discussed a little bit about potential changes to I don't know, it's collective bargaining or just contractually with unions for the next go around for potential cost savings, I think. Right?
yes, he had mentioned one of the ideas for savings he was saying was not doing the 2% COLA increase next year, and that would require, if you did it for everyone, that would require negotiations with the unions. If we want to get them to not do any increases.
Okay.
So that's where what's going on with that.
Well, I suspect he'll share the financial impact of that, and he would cover the logistics and operational. Obviously, that's outside of our domain on FinCom.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on people's minds?
Just a comment.
Yes.
Again, from the school committee, there were remarks made that they don't expect the overrides to pass.
And yet the superintendent commented that she didn't have any reason to believe that it would change.
It would
That their budget wouldn't change.
Right. None of their needs have changed, so they didn't think the override would. So, interesting to hear what the
Jim.
school committee said.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Catherine. Didn't mean to
Oh, go ahead.
interrupt
I'm
you.
sorry. Nope. Done.
What was, I guess for both of you, when they said the override wouldn't pass, did they mean the school overrides, the town, or they weren't?
I think they're
specific?
referencing this. I was in and out of that meeting. My wife was watching it more, but it was a reference to the school override.
So.
They were
and then-
pessimistic about it. Let me put it that way.
Okay, and then the superintendent is not coming back. Is that correct? That I heard
Correct.
correct. Okay.
She's done on at the end of the fiscal year. The new one starts July 1st.
Okay. Thank you.
Has the new superintendent been made? Has everyone been made aware of who the new superintendent is?
Yes, her name is Mary Beth Banyos. She's presently the superintendent of the Windsor County Supervisory Union District in Vermont, in Woodstock, Vermont. So she was chosen a couple of weeks ago, I guess, by the school committee.
Okay. What are your perspectives on changes to the likelihood of the overrides at this stage?
Me?
Anyone?
Oh, okay.
Sure. No, I mean,
No,
just
no,
Catherine,
I'll let-
yours as well, please.
No, it's a FinCom meeting.
No, that I'm very interested in yours as well.
Can we change the, I mean, I got a sample ballot here from Diane Bucco's office, and the sample ballot is already printed with the numbers on here. How
Yep.
would we change that? I mean, what would be the protocol for, if we decided to change any of those numbers, can we?
From my understanding, I think we keep those numbers because it's too hard to go and reprint everything at this point. But maybe overstepping there, I'm not positive, but I believe that's what I heard.
Because these people are receiving absentee ballots, I understand,
Yes.
and are voting on the ballot questions as well as the election. But
Just, doesn't it tie into whether or not we were to appropriate differently or ask the public to appropriate budget expenditures at town meeting differently from otherwise from the current plan,
yeah,
rendering the authorization immaterial on the ballot? Catherine, do you know about that? Has the
Well,
select board
I
talked about
find
that?
it all very confusing, and I had a protracted conversation with council at a couple of meetings ago, and I left that conversation with only a little more, feeling a little more knowledgeable. I think legally we have the ability to even change the override amounts legally, but to Chris's point, logistically, with ballots being printed and some being sent out, I don't know what that would mean. And yes, there is an interaction between the ballot question and what we vote at town meeting, but it's not, I have to admit, I need a little more. I asked for written guidance on that because I couldn't follow it.
I think that's needed for everybody.
Mhm.
So hopefully Anthony can provide that summary level view of what the options are at this stage, because I think that's the key question. Let's say, for example, we decided to cut 50 grand out of our FY21, just making up a number, 100 grand, whatever. How does that even play out with regard to, FinCom can amend its recommendations, they're printed in the warrant book, okay, fine, ballots printed. But what options are available to us to alter that which we're asking the town to authorize, to appropriate and authorize in terms of levy?
And we can't be the only town facing these issues. So I don't recall reading anything in the Massachusetts law that passed regarding extension of town meetings and budgets and things like that. But there may be something in there to make it simpler, or if not, I'm wondering if there'd be something forthcoming from the Secretary of State to try to simplify this, because we're not the only town facing this.
The legislature has put out guidelines relative to the budget and has allowed towns to not have a budget in place by June 30th.
Yep.
To go into the next year, and actually to, sort of take a 1/12 look at it. But we're in a kind of a unique situation with having our levy limit budget and then the override and those being voted, I think, needing to be voted at both town meeting and the ballot.
Right.
So you're right though, Carrie, there's got to be other towns that are maybe not in the override situation, but certainly in the situation of changing their budgets. As a matter of fact, there was a DLS advisory that came out tonight that encouraged towns to relook at their FY21 budgets. So somebody's talking about it.
there hasn't been any recent ruling, though. We still have to have the ballot promulgated before June 30. Is that correct? I haven't
They've-
heard any relief on that.
Right,
piece.
they've not changed the election deadline to June 30, which is why we have this present save the date.
Yeah,
But several folks have suggested that that legislation, or that, I don't know whether it comes as an executive order or legislation, could be happening
mhm.
because of where
Yeah.
we are in terms of the surge, et cetera, but nothing yet.
Okay, I mean, my thought is that whatever our feelings were about the likelihood of one or both overrides passing, is if it's unchanged, just because you haven't given it much thought, right? I mean, everything else has changed dramatically. Hey, Anthony, on mute, but welcome. And I think that even if we could change, let's say, cut a third of our override out, hypothetically, I think we're in a really difficult position with the logistical challenge, just how much time has been lost already, during which we would normally have communicated to residents what the FY21 budget was, why it was what it was, and had an opportunity to hear from them and answer their questions. Mike and Jim and I had one.
So are you saying that,
Go ahead, Carrie.
are you saying that, I'm trying to figure out if you're saying that because of the logistical challenges and the timing, that it doesn't merit trying to get changes through if the circumstances and the numbers look like it's worth making a change? Or that's it? My computer's freezing up. Did you guys
Yeah,
hear
no
me?
problem. It's refreshing to have you freeze up, unlike me last week. Which, by the way, I was on my pro Zoom account or whatever it is through my work laptop, remoted into 6 different machines. Then I realized I was behind the firewall after the meeting, which must have been the delay, because I'm on a silly little, iPad right now, and it seems to be working fine. So sorry about the delay last go around. No, sorry, Carrie. I wasn't suggesting that considering changes to the budget are not warranted. I think absolutely we should consider all of it. That doesn't mean we have to do anything. It means we should. I guess what I was trying to describe is the fact that even if there was no financial impact to this whole thing, which is completely the opposite, right? This is a massive financial impact globally to the economy, large scale, macro, micro, personal, paycheck risk, everything. Even if there was none, the logistical challenges forced upon everybody of staying inside and not assembling as a community as we normally would has hamstrung us hugely. So even if everything was just as it was, aside from the fact that let's assume we were going to that there was no kind of lockdown, so to speak, or whatever, right? No social distancing, no anything. But we couldn't assemble for town meeting, and we couldn't have a budget forum, and we couldn't continue with the second COA meeting after the first, and all of that. I think those have basically meaningfully decreased the probability of residents having the opportunity to, unfortunately, really understand what this whole thing is all about. And then you tack on, you say, okay, it's a 10% tax rate increase, and what does that do to it? I think it only hinders their ability to understand and support it if they otherwise would, and therefore lowers the probability of it. So if the school's pessimistic, I guess I'm saying I'm pessimistic too.
Yeah, I'm pessimistic as well. I think people are taking enough of a financial hit. Plus, there's a whole public education piece, and people are going to be regrouping for who knows how long, at least through the summer. I'm skeptical that any override would pass. Wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. The other thing is, I would think, we already kind of touched on this, that there are substantive savings from the school district. I mean, there's no sports program, there's no cafeteria, there's the transportation.
They're still paying cafeteria.
Really, they're buying all the food? They're buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of food?
Well, I don't know if they're buying, I don't think food's going to come to that. It's most of the money's in personnel costs, but they're paying their cafeteria workers. They're paying the school bus contract. The buses aren't rolling. it's one of the problems that I wish the governor would decide and say that we're going to close or not, because if he closes schools, which I think is going to happen, we'd have an opportunity for some more savings. But because it's the uncertainty, that's why DESI is basically saying, continue to pay all your bills, because you don't know if you're going to go back into school, and you got to be prepared that if they say we start Monday, that you're able to provide all the services. There's the
it's
special,
despite
there's the, sorry, just to give you go on that, there's still like the special ed cost that, for kids that are not in at those services that we're still paying for. And that's, as we know, is a huge cost to the district.
And they're still making meals, right? For the disadvantaged families.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Right?
true.
So-
Acorn, are they doing it?
The Bucher Kitchen is open
Oh,
to
okay.
provide, just the Bucher Kitchen, to provide meals for that purpose that they are
Okay.
giving to a court.
Okay.
So I guess, and maybe the expenditure on the order of 100 or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of food plays out over a longer time period than the month we've been shut inside. But I suspect that it's dramatically decreased. Carrie, I think it was you that raised a point last week that there's no paper. David, somebody said, you're not using paper. I mean, it's true. I mean, you're not, they print an absurd quantity on paper, and it's expensive. And I know because our company went paperless several years ago. And the
And I
savings,
know 'cause I'm buying toner every week for my household needs.
all of that, right? Exactly. And I had mentioned earlier, Anthony, that I would think on the energy expenditure as well should be reduced. Now, these buildings might be open, but they are dark at night versus lighting up gymnasiums, with big metal halides, so that Molitano can coach, our daughters in basketball.
Always Dave.
That's
Poor
savings.
Dave's always getting picked on.
Coaching's a relative term.
I've
Herding,
seen you
maybe?
coach.
Yeah,
You
hurting.
can
Yeah.
coach Elsa. You're doing great. Yeah, it's great. So, yeah, and I think, Anthony, your point's important. That despite the unprecedented cessation of everything, we still have these structural absurdities that, unless otherwise, negated by some statewide policy mandate that it's shut down, whatever the hell that means, because as far as I'm concerned, we already have, that everything is business as usual from an expenditure standpoint. And that's why perhaps the schools, to Jim's point, are saying, hey, it's we're everything's still going as normal. But I think that on the town side, perhaps less so, just order of magnitude. But on the school side as well, there have to be.
The longer the state delays contracts being paid out, the less the state is going to have to pay out in unemployment.
Great point. Self-serving interest there, and I think the nature of the state's attitude towards some of those structural matters, perhaps.
Although we pay some of that back, any claim but there still is savings there. You're right, Carrie, but it's not one for one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anthony, did you say the bus contract wasn't adjusted?
No, the message that DESI passed to them was, try to go and negotiate and see if you can get them to reduce it. Now, I don't know what was done there, Jim, so I don't know if they did do anything yet on that. I'd be curious to know too, because the last selectmen's meeting, that they wanted me to come up with some kind of cuts for the town, but it's towns. From my point of view, the town side has been taking the hit in this community for a long time, and the schools have been absorbing all of the excess capacity that we have. So unless the school was coming up with some kind of reductions too, that we could turn back to the town, it's once again, the town side's just going to keep taking the hit.
The skepticism on behalf of the schools, it sounds like, for their own override to pass, and the suggestion that I think was made, Jim, I think you mentioned that they don't, or Catherine, that they don't expect to have a different FY21 budget reduced. Maybe they have a different one in the form of increase, additional asks, but I think that's in contrast, those are in conflict with one another, right? To not expect the override to pass, but to not take any steps towards. If we feel the same way about our own override, not that we have any more control over the town override than the school override, of course, it's up to the residents, but we can control the budget and the town side of it, other than the school's line item. And if we feel that it's less likely to pass, I think we owe it to residents to at least consider where we can take steps to reduce it. I don't know what those cuts should be, would be, or what degree of impact they would even have. I think looking at capital expenditures, of course, it's probably warranted for a deferral. They're limited anyway. And, you know, we've got, you know, fire truck. I don't know that this really would change our view there. Public safety is as important as ever. But, you know, poor Council on Aging building roof, you know, that we punted on last year. I mean, what's that, $20,000? How much does that change things? We're gonna have to evaluate options, if any. And if we come up with none, we come up with none. But I think our hand might be forced if ultimately if residents in this situation aren't supportive of a 9.5% tax rate increase.
A couple of things. One, in addition just to the override, I don't recall any discussion, maybe there was, I haven't seen the most recent Board of Select meeting I saw 2 meetings ago. Has there been any thought or discussion about other financial articles? And whether or not we would keep those, strike those?
Like I said, I think that you should, what a lot of towns are doing is holding off on the capital items till the fall. Maybe we can't do all of them. The COA roof is
But
pretty
also
important.
just other financial articles like the, like some of the taxes that were the meals tax, or just any other, I'd have to look at my list of articles.
That's not a
Has there
tax
been
to the
any
community.
discussion?
So that's not a tax to the community. That's a tax to the consumer, but certainly you can take those off the table. That only just adds to the problem, because that's just revenue that you're missing out on an opportunity. The whatever percent, the penny is not going to make a big difference, but certainly you can take that off the table if that's going to confuse people. It's not a lot of money, but to me, it's money that we're worried about the budget, yet we're not going to take an opportunity where the state's already getting 6%, that we're not going to say, let's get 6.1% or whatever it is. I don't know. You know, why is the state reducing the meals tax? It's up to the community, but I don't see that as a hit to the residents.
Yeah, and I'd have to get I don't have my list with me of all the articles, but just other financial articles. Has there been any discussion with Board of Select? I don't recall any with FinCom. Just looking at things other than the override and level services.
The Board of Selectmen hasn't had any discussion, I don't think, unless I've forgotten something, Anthony. Hasn't really had any discussion about FY21 and the override yet.
No, the goal was for a week from Tuesday to discuss what the impacts would be if the override didn't pass. So that would kind of be the first time that we go back to having discussions about FY21.
Okay.
Anthony, that's in your meeting next week?
That would be a week, yeah. This week is we're going to talk about 20. Next week, we're going to talk about 21.
And then where do things stand on staffing levels with the town? I mean, the school too, but the school's already said they're not contemplating any cuts. When I watched 2 Board of Select meetings ago, it sounded like hold things steady with staffing through FY20, and then in FY21, if there's still a shutdown, maybe examine changing staffing levels. Is that a correct recollection of the Board of Select discussion?
No, they tasked me with coming up with cuts for FY20. So I we'll be discussing that with them on Tuesday night. We'll be discussing some portions during executive session because it's contract related. And then there's this topic, an opportunity to discuss it outside in open session.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't give you any
No, that,
insight.
yeah, no, I was just talking, you know, more generalities. I'm just curious. I think it's, you know, try to avoid that as much as possible. But also, if we're shut down, if certain areas of the town are shut down for extended periods of time, is it worth reviewing and looking at?
Yeah, I
think-
don't. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say, I think just for clarification, Anthony was tasked by the majority of the board to look at potential areas of reduction that we would discuss. And to Chris's point, I think when we know a little bit more perhaps about revenue, we'd have be ahead of the game to understand where we needed to make reductions.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think we're in a holding pattern for a little while until we get more numbers rolling in one direction or another.
I think that those revenue changes might play out so when we think about for example, our free cash use in the budget and how we've tightened up our projections overall, both on the expense and revenue side, the revenue side can't be tight enough to reflect how it'll be in FY21. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a hit to local receipts that, even a 10% hit is going to be, what, 60 grand? We get about 600, 700 in local receipts. Is that about right, Chris? Ballpark?
You mean, well, not including property taxes?
Oh yeah,
you're
not
saying?
levy, straight up local receipts.
Excise is 600,000.
Yeah.
And that makes up most of it, really, is
Yeah.
the excise tax.
That's
So,
what I'm referring to.
yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, people probably won't be buying it, new cars or anything, so we definitely could see a decrease in the excise tax.
but we do budget that conservatively to start with, but
Yes.
Right.
so it's
It's going to play out over time. Honestly, I mean, Anthony, I think the points that you made were pretty spot on last week when you said, in some ways we're isolated because we've got a tax levy, a residential tax base almost exclusively, and we're not looking at a commercial tax base impact, for example, that other communities very different from ours do, cities, larger towns.
right.
Even those will take time to play out. But that said, there's going to be, there's twofold. There's going to be financial, and non-financial based pain and frustration that plays out in multiple ways. One, the inability to pay one's real estate taxes or to change the way that they fund the town in other smaller ways, right? Like I'm not going to buy a pass to the pool or the pond, or I guess that's joint rec, but to the pond, or I'm going to, not register my dog, whatever it may be. Just, hey, I'm not going to spend, $100 or whatever it is.
Keep in mind too.
And I was just going to say, there's also the, the willingness to support kind of the ongoing expensive operations of the town as a high tax rate town, kind of the attitude and versus willingness.
Yeah, keep in mind too, Alex, that on March 17th, I put a spending freeze in place for all non-COVID related items for expenses. Yep. So, I would expect actually that depending on how the revenues to go, that we actually have more free cash than we've had in prior years because of that. Quite possibly. So there's still a lot. I was just having a conversation with Bill that, he could end up turning back 250 right now as if nothing, we're not doing any new spending. So we are taking that precaution to offset what whatever that revenue loss might be, which is we just don't know. You know, the good thing about, and not that there's any good thing about this pandemic, but you know, most people pay their have mortgages, or a lot of people have their mortgages, and we rely upon the mortgage company to send that money to us. So, sorry, my phone just rang and I'm on the phone. So most of the real estate taxes were already accrued because it was due on May 1st. So that's a good thing for us, for those that are paying through a mortgage.
And I do want to bring up too, relating the spending freeze. We may not, compared to last year, may not see a huge difference because we did have a spending freeze around the same time last year as well. So we may just see it may be in line with last year, but last year may have been down last year because we had the spending freeze last year as well.
Yeah, the operations are still going on in the town, so where it's not right now. We're not doing the catch basin repairs, and we're not doing all the stuff
True.
that we still had to do next year, even with a spending freeze. It was just non-essential stuff. Right
Gotcha.
now, we've
Okay.
had a complete, almost shutdown. So it might be a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And last year's spending freeze was because of, was it cash flow issues? Why did last year's get implemented?
The concern about
Yeah.
departments not making budgets.
Yeah, last year we had a lot of retirements and we had to pay out a lot of sick and vacation buyouts. So that we didn't budget for. Two longtime library people retired. That was a big hit. And there was someone else's, at least one other person as well. So that was a big, probably 80,000 right there that we hadn't budgeted for, that we had to pay out. So to be conservative, we put that freeze on.
Mhm.
And just a heads up, we got like 10 more minutes and we have to wrap this meeting up.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have much else, frankly. Next week, let's do minutes. Catherine's been sending over a ton, and I thank you for that, Catherine. I haven't been as good about forwarding them on. I thought they're being blasted to everybody, then I realized it was just Chris and me. So Chris, you and I have our minutes, but not everybody else.
I'm pretty sure I've sent them all out, but if I haven't, let me know.
I have a set of 3 or 4 that we got last week. I don't know if there's more.
This weekend, I'll email the dates of the meetings that I would love to get just in order. We don't have to go for broke and do all of them, because I know we've got a lot to do. But let's get caught up on those, and it's on me. So my apologies, but I'll get you the dates, and if you can we'll probably do 5 or so anyway.
Caught up, Alex, so if you're missing any, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Much appreciated.
Oh, and Alex, one more
Yeah.
thing real quick. We have it scheduled for a 6 o'clock meeting next week. Do you want to move that up to 5:30? Because we do have a 6:45 stop time again next week, and then we should.
Yeah, 5:30 if everyone's okay with that.
Okay.
Okay. The invites don't work for me. For some reason I can't open them. I don't know if anyone else can or cannot. The email based, it comes from the permitting office, the Zoom invite.
No, I got them fine.
They work fine. You can open it, and it's a calendar.
That's how I've been opening them.
Yeah, I attempt to do that. I just get some random error on my iPhone. Strangely, I don't know. But as long as other people get them, all I need is a Zoom ID anyway. So.
Yeah, again, too. Then if there's an issue, I can start when I send out the agendas and everything. I can I can just put the link in the email as well. If people are having a hard time with that, I can throw it on there as well. I know I emailed Jim. Jim asked me. I emailed him the link before the meeting. So if you want, I can start including them in the email when I send out the agendas.
That was my inaptitude.
Hey, I gotta run.
And you're here.
Thanks, Anthony.
I gotta run. If anybody has any questions, want to talk, has more questions, I'm available. Just let me know.
Thank
All right?
you.
All right. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Anthony.
Bye.
Okay. Any other comments? Harriet, did you have anything, any questions or comments? Sorry, at the onset, I should have asked you, I suppose, if so, for public comment. And if you've stepped away, that's fine too. And I don't think Gary's there. I'm not used to the iPad version of this, but I see we've got the Brady
Yes,
Bunch.
Gary here too.
Oh, Gary's there too. Do I need to swipe?
He just unmuted. Hi, Gary.
Oh, okay. Hi, Gary.
I'm here, but just listening and no comments.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for joining us, regardless, or as always. Okay. Any other for discussion? So for next week, I think if you could dust off the budget binders and not go through every single line item, but categorically try and think about what areas of the budget you think would be priority-wise just of more importance than others to revisit. I think, Carrie, you raised the point about the you said the non-financial article, or like the financial articles that aren't.
Are there any financial articles that we may want to strike?
Or just recontemplate. Again, we've made our recommendation on all of these, and on each financial article, and be thinking about probably more so. It sounds like from a policy standpoint, select board working with Anthony are at bat first to kind of think about FY20 changes. And then I think some of the stuff's going to start to bleed over into FY21. Like we make a change or we don't in FY20, end of the fiscal year, be here before you know it, the standard end of it, regardless of any kind of extension of sorts, a lot that we're allowed to continue into FY21. But from our standpoint, we should be prepared to, make changes or not in light of everything that's going on, but have given sufficient consideration, I think, to the budget. Again, I think we owe it to residents, and we need to continue to try and find ways. It'll probably end up being a Zoom meeting for a budget forum of sorts prior to June 20.
Okay.
Just one point to think about possibly is getting back to the schools and seeing if they have talked with the schools about consideration in the recontracting process for their contracts, whether they're in that process, and are they going to have any consideration like where we are of looking at how we reduce costs vis-a-vis contracts.
Who's our representation for in those CBA talks? Is Anthony or select board? It doesn't rotate through.
Oh, well, it rotates through towns. So it was Peter last year. So it would be someone in Hamilton for the next contract, which they'd be negotiating starting next, I hope, starting next fall.
So we don't have it starting this fall or
No,
20?
next year, this coming school year is the last year of their 3-year contract. So they'll start negotiations for the following year's contract.
Right.
In
Right.
September,
So Jim,
October, November.
Thanks, Catherine. That makes sense. So in calendar year 21 for FY22, it sounds like, right? It's kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
So
Well, school year, school year.
school year 2021.
Right. They'll have to be talking about and negotiating the contract that will start in, I guess it's fiscal year, but the teachers will start in September of 22. Is that right?
Okay.
They're locked into a contract for next year. Is that, I guess, what I'm trying to say?
And I know we got to wrap, but Anthony was thinking along the same lines of potentially, not with any certainty, but potentially revisiting town contracts subject to the next standard cycle, right? Not, or was that not the case? Catherine, do you know offhand? Sorry to put you in the spot.
Well, I think it would be imprudent for any either superintendent or town administrator, town manager, not to be talking to the leadership of their unions about potential issues for FY20 and FY21.
Fair enough.
So
Right.
I would be surprised if those conversations were not happening. Now, to what extent, how broadly, certainly, no one's impact bargaining yet. And
Right.
I think it would be great to have more communication with the school, which is a tough one right now. Anthony and Joe Domilovitz and the superintendent have been talking, but I'm not sure that's the best combination anymore since she's leaving. But
More so with the current acting superintendent.
right. So
Not so much Anthony and Joe, but you're saying
Right.
we don't have a great liaison with the schools, period, at this stage.
right.
Other
Just my
than-
opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think as we've all stated multiple times publicly this past year that we had a good dialogue with the administration, and that will probably need to be reformulated with the new superintendent but that's some time from now, right? So,
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for all of that.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I know we got to wrap here. Any final remarks, comments, questions?
Yes, in terms of the new superintendent, Alex, last time Dr. Kuchenberger reached out to us, but I'm thinking in July, August, maybe, if we don't hear from the new superintendent, it might be worth us reaching out to do a kind of listening session both ways to her.
Yep, for sure. Absolutely, Carrie. Yeah, try to get off on a good start there. With the new superintendent. Totally agree. Yep. Thank you.
And July is not that far away.
We're going to get gypped out of a summer, or who knows?
Yeah, no budget season break.
You won't have anything else to do anyway, so you might as well do the budget.
Oh, goodness. All right.
This is Mike. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Mike. Second. Thanks, Carrie. All right. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Hi.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.